What's up, everybody? Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Sunday Open. I'm your host, Nick. Good morning, good afternoon. How's everybody doing in the chat? Am I coming in? Yes, we're good. Okay. Sorry, my my other screen that shows it actually going live to YouTube was like behind for a hot second. So I was like, I don't know if I'm actually live right now. I think I am, but I couldn't see it going through. So how is everybody doing? Everyone have a good weekend? I don't know about you. I basically was like full dad mode all weekend. We had my friend's 4-year-old's birthday. So got to get some vitamin D, touch some grass, do some better things. Got a bunch of things done around the house. So everything was good on our end. And ready to kind of attack this week. Last week was kind of weird. I think for everybody watching and trading, it felt like in the early parts of this week, a top was clearly put in equities. More or less, it seemed like, if you were short from 6,500s, you were having a wonderful time. And then Jay Powell basically said nothing new, stepped up to the mic on Friday during the Jackson Hole Symposium. Talks. Was not necessarily as dovish, or excuse me, as hawkish as he was during the most recent FOMC, the FOMC that we even had the minutes for on Wednesday of last week. And naturally, the market just went straight to the moon. In fact, if you were caught blindsided by that, I mean, don't be shocked. I think that caught me off guard. I wasn't even at the desk on Friday, but actually, let's go to the charts. Let's do that. Let's make sure this is actually up. So there's your move. There's your Friday right here, where we basically went up all the way to whatever you want to call this little all-time high area, this balance area high. We couldn't even make a new all-time high, and kind of just meandered around the previous week's value area high, which basically was sitting around the kind of 85s to 90 range. So I took one small trade in the pre-market on Friday. I really had no interest in kind of sitting at my desk and trading the afternoon fallout of whatever that speech was going to be. Jacksonville, historically, I've stayed away. It kind of happened a couple years ago when we had that very violent, I think like 4% down day in 2022. I mean, it was 2022. I think it was. And then it's just been like an FOMC where it's violent, it's illiquid at times, and I just have no interest in kind of sitting there and trading it. So the market's going to continue to sit at an inflection point, I guess is what I'm kind of alluding to. I absolutely think that there's a very high probability we probably make a new all-time high, but after that, I don't know. I mean, obviously we're the Fed funds futures, our bond rates kind of retreated a little bit on Friday. So it seems like everything is good. I don't know how you can kind of look at this and say, where's my cursor? Did I lose my cursor? Hang on, guys. Oh, no. Is Ninja going to crash on me as I am on air? Let's see. Might have to bear with me. Let's see if this wants to crash, or I might have to reload it, and then you get to see my beautiful mug as I continue to ramble. So we'll see. Am I back? My charts are back. Oh, and we crashed. All right. Sav, you want to just go to a 1-up for me while I load this back up? Technology, folks. That's how it works sometimes. So give me a couple seconds. Bear with me as I reload a Ninja here in a hot second. So, and as I'm doing this, if there are questions or anything you want to talk about in this quick second while I have to reload all my charts, gotta love when that happens. So bear with me. Part of the problem was if you saw the bloodbath that is Bitcoin, I did screw with my charts as I was about to come on air. I was trying to create and load a a 1 hour Bitcoin chart with my indicators and MGI and volume profile. So I was looking at the micro Bitcoin futures and trying to get a chart created for you guys so we could talk about it. So maybe that was the reason that it decided to kind of crash on me trying to load that last chart, which I'm assuming now we may not be able to do it because I don't want I obviously didn't save the chart book as it was loading that either. So it's a high probability that it did not load, and that might have been the reason why it just decided to break Ninja for me. The fun of loading like I think I have like 4+ months of volume profile for several instruments. It's, you're at the mercy of the internet and my PC not trying to die on me. So we'll let this all kind of kick up and load again. And we'll talk about it. So Pi, no, I did not sync anything. So we'll see how this goes. It's now recalculating and reloading. Like I said, I load several months worth of volume and delta information into Ninja. So I am asking for any platform to break sometimes when I do this. So naturally, probably not the best time to create a new chart is right when you're about to go on air. So how was everyone else's weekend? Anyone do anything fun in the chat while we're waiting for my charts to reload? Hopefully we can get it up, but we got 9 minutes before the open, so we're good. I'm happy to stay on a couple minutes extra and make sure we get through absolutely everything. I'm just going to make sure I don't break anything while we're loading. PC specs do I have? I'm running, I can't remember which NVIDIA chip that I have. I bought a pre-built one because I'm lazy, but I just listen to people smarter than me, at least like what's a decent pre-built to kind of get. So I'm running like 64 gigs of RAM, and it works for, I don't do anything on this outside of run the streaming stuff and, different chart books for various platforms and, obviously do the show. So I don't overload it. Especially not when I'm just doing the stream. It's the only thing really loading is Ninja. I'm not trying to make sure everything breaks while I'm on air. Naturally, that happens. So it's all good. But yeah, I've never had any issues with my PC running several things at the same time. So this is an outlier information. Yeah, that's kind of the problem with loading all of this volume data sometimes. Every once in a while, a platform wants to say no, too much. And it's my fault for trying to load the Bitcoin data on top of YM, GC, CL, NQ, and ES. And then my execution chart too. So I was asking for trouble by Bitcoin was just one too many, apparently. But the reason I was building, I think I was kind of alluding to this when I was making this joke as we were coming on air. But Bitcoin had a violent like -2% candle in the last, I don't know, I guess that was like 4 or 5 hours ago. So I was just curious how it was going to open, and I figured it'd be fun to watch and talk about a little bit. I don't actively trade the Bitcoin, as Jim calls it, but I think when you see something like that and it kind of goes the other way of what we see sometimes, which it not necessarily follows equities, but sometimes it can lean a little bit of being in correlation with NQ at times. At least they've not necessarily followed each other, or NQ is going to follow Bitcoin by any means, but sometimes it just is not necessarily a leading indicator, but it kind of just, the way it moves since it's open 24 hours, I just thought it might be interesting. Yeah, 4,000 down in about 10 minutes. So that was kind of wild to see. So I was hoping to show it. So maybe we'll see what the overnight kind of brings us. And I'll be back tomorrow morning with Leo trading the open. So hopefully I can spend a few minutes actually getting that set up so that we could at least take a look at it tomorrow. Maybe if there's more violence or we rebound. I mean, that was pretty crazy in about, like I said, a 10-minute, if you were looking at like the 5-minute candle, that was pure violence to the downside. So, all right. Let's see if my long time frame charts have loaded so everyone can stop looking at my face this whole time. We're still calculating, but the volume profile is there, so we can at least pop that back on, I think. So still waiting for my MGI to load, but for the most part, not much has changed as far as my plan. Yes, we had this absolute outlier trend day to the upside, and then we did nothing. We kind of came up to the top side of this distribution from the previous week in ES, and then just meandered around there. Couldn't go poke above it, couldn't go make a new all-time high, couldn't chase down 6,500 on the SPX, no matter how many options were being bought to the call side up here all afternoon long. Was probably the main reason why we couldn't go any lower. But you just were kind of seeing not a lot of interest in buying the all-time high on Friday post Jackson Hole. It just was kind of sitting around there. So what that tells me is, I mean, not necessarily anything has changed. I'm going to be very much focused on what's actually happening as we, are attacking this week. But I'm cautiously bullish again. I was not necessarily bearish this, the last 2 weeks, but I was just kind of trading price action. I was looking for a lot of shorts last week, and it paid at times. I just kind of seemed to be on the right side of it, but there were a lot of violent moves back up to the upside. And one thing we talked about last Sunday, which was it's hard to get too bearish until we lose kind of the August open here and kind of fall back towards 6,300, which is still where my pivot's going to be for this week. Even though we're up here, I mean, I'm not looking to really open any swing shorts. Not necessarily up here. I would want to see another possible like peak above. And I mean, if we don't make a new all-time high, but another failure up here in this area. If we lose kind of this, what was the wall for the last, I mean, even in the early parts of this week, we talked about it on Monday. We talked about it the previous week. This 6460 spot, how many times could you have taken a decent long off that for about maybe 7 trading days? I mean, it just was a very reliable level, and no surprise when you kind of look at this volume structure, there was a lot of interest in buying there. So once again, in the event that we get some sort of gap down tonight or into tomorrow, if we're still kind of meandering around this spot and, you're not finding a lot of selling interest to push us below this, I will happily, since I've taken it like once out of like the 7-8 times it would have worked. But I will happily maybe take a stab in trying to long here in the low 60s in the early parts of this week, unless there's some narrative, unless there's some catalyst, anything that's going to actually drive us to retrace some of Friday. But once again, it kind of comes down to, let's see what price action really tells us. I don't want to necessarily fade this reaction post Jackson Hole. And then we have things like NVIDIA earnings on deck this week, where we very much could just be back into the same structure in the early parts of this week while we wait for Jensen to once again send us higher and possibly, be the genius that he is, just continuing to sell shovels and pickaxes in the AI race. It seems, I don't think he cares that nobody's really found like a lot of profitable use cases in the Fortune 100 yet, but he's still selling chips left and right. So it's hard to have a bearish thesis on NVIDIA unless they just completely, a bearish thesis on NVIDIA unless their earnings are just that terrible, or if they're just so priced to perfection that the reaction is just negative. But NVIDIA earnings have always been a wild one, just like you see with the rest of the Mag 7. They can absolutely move the market. So we'll talk about that and the rest of earnings this week. There's a couple good software IT names that you should be paying attention to as well this week. So a few things to keep in mind as we're kind of attacking it, but we are, what time is it? We are about 60 seconds from the Globex Open. And I apologize once again, folks, for my charts deciding to break on me as we're on air. So thank you all for bearing with me as always. Live programming. What are we going to do? Things happen. We work through it and we're back. So, but is the market so back? I want to hear from you. What do we think for tonight's open? Gap up, gap down, settlement? I don't really know. I would not want to be the first person to short this. And since it was a relatively quiet weekend as far as news and anything else that came out, I don't really know why Bitcoin decided to fall off a cliff, but it would not shock me to come back a little bit, maybe in the 60, 64, 70s, maybe a little lower. So maybe I'm going to bet small gap down, but what do you guys think? Charts don't break on their own. And in fact, we had a slight gap up in both. Week open on NQ, going to put us around a little above the 600s, like 604, 603s. I need to see the exact number. ES week open 93s. So 2 important numbers to mark on your charts if you don't have automated MGI information like I do. 64.93s week open in ES and right around like 603s and change. I can't exactly see that number in NQ to be paying attention to. So far, gap up, immediately retraced back towards settlement's a little bit lower, but back towards kind of where the after hours close was. So yeah, as far as ES, I'm not really looking for anything outside of a quick scalp short if one presented itself until we really break below 64.60s. And then I would expect us to, retrace a good amount of this Friday candle, perhaps down here towards the 64.20, 64.30s, somewhere in that range. And then it might become like, hey, we're just going to continue to be in this relatively wide balance range for the time being. And there's nothing wrong with that. Hopefully volume returns. I know everyone's been screaming seasonality and it kind of made sense with the downside we were seeing. And then you get a Jackson Hole candle. So tough to, like I said, tough to want to fade this. But in the event that we lose this big volume node for the last 2 weeks, then by all means, short this down to the bottom side of balance back towards 6400s. Kind of makes sense. So we'll see. And to the upside, I mean, new all-time highs, and we probably start talking, levels up here towards 6,600. But who knows? I would much rather us kind of poke above and maybe fall back into this structure a little bit. I just hate all-time. And guys, we've been trading all-time highs all summer, and I just hate it, and I'm so tired of trading it. So I would love us to continue to not necessarily be range bound, but maybe retest some of these levels a little bit lower. I know it's, like I said, the narrative doesn't necessarily favor that, but in the event that we poke up, I mean, we're back to how we've been trading all summer, which is, look for a good pullback to get long, and you will have a good time. If you try to short these all-time highs, you will have a bad time. You're going to have a bad time. That's ES. Like I said, and even from the last couple of weeks, even going back to the old all-time high here at the end of July, like there's some pretty poor volume structure between kind of the 64.30s and the bottom edge of the 64.60s. Like we have not really filled in a ton of that volume. So that would also be interesting potentially as another place that you could see it accelerate, or buyers starting, or interest starting to grow kind of in this general vicinity where we start to just build out a little structure and then we can make another leg higher. And as always, guys, if you've never tuned in tonight or into this show, or it's your first time hanging out with us, this is kind of what we do. I know we had a little break there for a few minutes, but we go through, I'm going to jump to NQ here in a hot second, but this is what we do. We go through ES, NQ, GC, and CL. I was hoping to show you micro Bitcoin, but clearly it just wasn't meant to be, and we have to live with that. So we'll move forward. But we do that. We talk about earnings. We talk about what's on the docket as far as economic releases for this week and any other gotchas. And we create a rough plan of how I'm kind of looking at it, how I'm kind of attacking it. You're seeing this raw. I did not spend a ton of time on the charts this weekend like I usually don't, because I like to touch grass and spend time with my family and do other things. So you get the first pass with me as I'm kind of dissecting this using volume profile and other information to kind of guide a rough plan for the week. And then you get to see me trade it hopefully tomorrow morning. The other thing to remember this week is it's kind of the last week of summer. Labor Day next week. The market will have a holiday next Monday. So we will hopefully be seeing volume return from a lot of the larger desks and institutions, and maybe we get some range expansion. One can only hope. But yeah, it kind of plays into some of the seasonality when volume picks back up too. So hopefully that will make a good environment for us traders. So we'll jump to NQ, but you may have just seen a message there in the chat from our NinjaTrader admin in the chat, reminding you all to hit like and subscribe. We're going to do something really awesome when we hit 150,000 subscribers. So if you are not currently subscribed to this channel, I don't know what you're doing, but it's a good time to press that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss awesome programming that the NinjaTrader team puts out. But the likes also help more people find this stream, hang out with us here on Sunday evening, Monday morning for some of you people I know. So good to have everybody. And we're going to start talking a little bit about NQ. So NQ was not quite as a bullish, or maybe it was just based on Friday, but had a much higher velocity move to the downside last week as opposed to ES. ES just kind of never made that wider move to the downside as far as kind of that full July retrace that we saw here. NQ retraced another good portion of this move before making that next leg higher. And where did it settle at? Well, kind of the value area, old all-time high that we built a lot of structure on, and is sitting at the very bottom of this kind of 2-week balance, or maybe 7 days worth of balance that we kind of created over a little over a week ago. So what that tells me is it's another kind of decision point for NQ. We very much could find sellers offering here. If not, we're probably going to make a trip immediately back up towards the 800s, the 820s. 23,800s, which would kind of is basically last week's value area high too. So you had a decent little structure build there in the early parts of this week. We didn't really get very far. This was pretty much the Monday range that we were sitting in. And then we had that violent downside on Tuesday. It was worse than NQ. I keep thinking of it in ES too, which just was kind of a slow death march on Tuesday. And then we had that next leg down on Wednesday. So you had a very, very high velocity move to retrace this all the way down to 23,000s before we kind of rebid, came back to the August open, reoffered there, came down, and then Jackson Hole happened. And we settled right back to the top edge of last week's value area. So just sitting right here currently around that 23,600s. So I'd be very much in the early parts of this week watching for a reaction at that week open, exactly where we just reoffered right around 600s so far to start Globex here, 50 points lower so far. So I'd just be kind of cautious if I'm holding anything but runners here. I wouldn't necessarily want to be the first person to initiate right at 600s. If we start to get that build, perhaps up here towards kind of the 620, 630s, then yeah, maybe you can catch that decent long and we can get that move to the upside back up towards 800s. So I think NQ has, I mean, I don't want to necessarily offer ES up near the 6490s. I just think there can always be an equal opportunity, a very high probability that we're going to make a new all-time high. And I don't necessarily want to be caught there, but NQ is setting up just based on kind of the structure here, an interesting spot to potentially try to short or just be watching for a reaction for. Because like I said, if we get that build or any sort of, buyers stepping in, continuing to kind of lift offer over here, then maybe we're going to go make that 200-point move up towards 800s. And I'd love to be a part of that, especially if we can kind of get this, full balance area rotation and perhaps go make a new all-time high, go back up towards 24,000s, which we did not have much interest outside of that violent poke above new all-time high up here towards 24,070s. We've had no interest from buyers continuing to want to bid us up here. So I'm taking that somewhat seriously, and given that we had so many attempts and you just found sellers being present and continuing to reoffer up there. So like I said, cautiously bullish, I guess, going into this week, just because I don't want to necessarily fade it with NVIDIA earnings on deck and the reaction from Jackson Hole, but who knows? Who knows what's about to happen? That's why we're traders. We kind of just have to execute with what's in front of us. But we make this plan so that you guys can have some spots that I think are interesting, some spots that make sense on the longer time frame to be looking for, not necessarily a trade, but some kind of reaction off of. And then you kind of adjust and you make your move based on what you're seeing on time and sales and other things. So in the event that this offer does continue to step in up here, then I would very much love to potentially target 22,800s again towards the downside, which is the very bottom of the last, I guess 2 months of structure now. That's where the bottom would fall out if we can't hold that spot. So in the intermediate area, you had a lot of volume builds between kind of the 23,300s and 23,200. So I would imagine that is possibly defended. I mean, we had a lot of back and forth there last week as well as even when we were retracing off that violent 2 days from the last 2 days of July. You saw the same thing. This kind of 200s to 300 spot, there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of indecision between there. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Like I said, hard to be too bearish, especially with NVIDIA on deck. NVIDIA could absolutely be the fuel that you need to go make a new all-time high. So we'll see. But I kind of like the way NQ may be setting up for this to act as a decent pivot for this week, to kind of watch that 600s and gauge who's in control. At least that's how I'd be focusing on it. So yeah, that's NQ. If not, up towards the 800s and back up here towards 23,000 and 950s to 400 to 24,000 evens is kind of how I'd be attacking this. I'm not looking necessarily to initiate a long up here potentially, but I would love to be a part of that. Once again, break up above 800s for that trip and see what happens there. All-time high trading. We'll see what happens. 1,000 lots on ES already? Really? I don't have ES up in front of me on the DOM. Where's the 1,000 lot? Or it already, it pulled. Jerk. I hate when people like to do shenanigans during Globex with size like that. Like, okay, we see you, friend. We see you. All right. So that's equities. NQ and ES. We'll kind of recap them towards the end too. But raise your hand if you can shame yourself for not taking the swing long at 62s like we talked about last Sunday in crude oil. Because guilty. It's very easy to be a shot caller with no money at risk compared to actually putting orders on the DOM and executing. So we talked about this exact setup. I said I was interested in potentially building into that position in the 61, 62s, and as high as 63 with micros and kind of building into a true swing long position in crude. And I just never did it. And this could be one, maybe that haunts me. We'll see. This is kind of another decision spot up towards 64s. Last week's value area low sitting, July's value area low sitting right there where we could absolutely reoffer and go test lower again. But if I had built into that swing, which once again, it's super easy to just talk that way versus me not putting money at risk. So something I still need to work on, which is, hey, you identified potentially a good setup. We talked about it live. I talked about it again Monday morning as we were continuing to kind of, give me opportunities to build into said position. Because we opened right around here and we kind of just meandered. It came back, kind of retested the previous week's, bottom edge of this structure too. So as far as like building into a swing position, I mean, that's about as safe of a price action as you could get and kind of start building and know where you're wrong in the event that we were going to go break below 61s. You're probably going to exit and just watch and wait. But I don't know why I didn't enter. I don't know why I didn't do this. This is why I have an account for this exact thing. And I don't know. Ever since my gold long at 2500s that I decided to hold for a total of like 5 hours, I've just not been a great swing trader as far as actually putting money at risk. So looking at this week, like I said, when we were talking about this last Sunday, you're kind of at the bottom edge of this larger balance that crude loves to trade in between kind of 64s and 67s and as high as kind of really what that main value area is, which is like 65s to 70s. So if you were building longs off this is kind of the put up or shut up spot for crude right here on 64s. If we can start to continue to find buyers here, then I love this for a rotation back up towards the value area high for July, at least up here towards 66s. If not, let's go get the August open up here towards 68s. Like, let's get that full, wide, lovely value range that crude loves to trade in. And that would have been that full swing that you're kind of looking for. Granted, me being paper handed at most times I would be probably completely out at 66. But I need to get better about actually taking these trades instead of just having a big mouth and talking about them. But hey, we talked about it. There was the opportunity. You continued to find volume building a little higher. So this is where, if sellers were to really step in, we probably go back down towards 62s, and maybe there'll be another opportunity for this trade. If not, like I said, I love potentially this making that rotation up here towards 66s in the top edge of this shorter time frame balance that we've kind of been in for the last couple weeks or 2 months, really, because it's the end of June. Yeah, we'll call it 2+ months since we had that Armageddon week. So I still like longs. I still think, perhaps us even wicking down here towards 63s again, there might be a decent opportunity to get long there for that full traverse up towards 66s. But this is the spot where if you were hoping to not find sellers, you might find some. So it'd be like cautious and being ready to either continue to add for this to actually break out much higher, or we're going to find a large seller here who's going to push us back down towards 63s. So I'm going to be watching crude. I'm going to see if it gives me a second chance. I probably missed it, to be honest, but we'll see. That's not where I wanted to enter down here. Like the 6180s, the value area low from last Sunday when we were kind of building. Like that's where I would have loved to kind of be averaged in. Anyway, I feel dumb. I feel dumb for not taking this trade. Did anyone take it? Anyone get a decent long in crude last week? Or are we all just so gung-ho on NQ that we forget that sometimes there may be other things that can easily make you money with a little bit less headache than the old Nasdaq sometimes gives a lot of us. Or you could just build into a nice safe long in crude oil and feel pretty good about yourself if you were still holding some micros heading into this week. Yep. I just need to get better about it, guys. There's something wrong with me. Pi said it. Can't let go of NQ. I know. She's a cruel temptress sometimes. Just gets all of us. I'd love to see data from the. I mean, maybe it's just the YouTube world. It just seems like everybody's trading NQ, but the volume from the CME probably tells another story. But it seems like the world that we all operate in and kind of exist in, it seems like majority of us trade NQ. But that's clearly not the case when we open the world up or open it up for the wider world that is futures trading. Clearly, everyone else is still trading other instruments. But anyway, that's crude. Like I said, if we get an opportunity potentially down here at 63s, maybe there's another chance to get long. If not, we're probably going to rotate back inside of the last 2 weeks value areas that overlap here between 63.20s and kind of the 61.60s to 80s. So we'll see. Like I said, maybe there's another opportunity to potentially build into a swing long, but I may have missed the easiest version of that trade. Everyone on Twitter trades NQ. It seems like that. Like I said, maybe it's just the poor circle that I have, that I surround myself with. Since, my three other trading buddies on this show, on NT Live with me, they all trade NQ, and I just like to be a little different, I guess. Show you guys something else with ES sometimes. I don't know. I may trade NQ this week. I have a chart book for NQ ready to go for the show. So, because I'm tired of ES in the afternoons while I could be scalping NQ for 20 points and having a much better time. So we'll see. That's crude. Now, gold had a real move post Jackson Hole's speech as well, just straight up to the upside and straight into resistance. Once again, nothing has changed in gold. In fact, we are still just sitting between 33.50s and 34.40s, basically, which if you look back at July's value area low, it's 33.60s, and the value area high is 34.30s. So we have not moved basically in months. Like, in fact, if I load all of my data here and zoom out, we are still in this. I should probably just draw a box at this point that we're never going to leave, because that's what gold continues to do. Even when it looks like after this violent tariff news, oh, we're going to tariff gold. So everyone sells it after the initial pop. And we settle back where? Well, right at July's value area low. And we continue to find buyers defending and supporting this balance area there. So nothing's changed. There's probably no harm in being long off these areas. It just seems like if we were going to break, we probably would have done it right now. So let's go higher, I guess. But I'd still be cautiously long, I guess, if we came back up towards those 3340s again. It's just been too much of a ping pong back and forth. Yeah. Bruce, so I was supposed to show you guys a Bitcoin chart and a micro Bitcoin futures chart, excuse me. And it decided to break my Ninja chart book here. So we're not going to make an attempt at reloading that here tonight live on stream. I was trying to it was loading and it was doing everything as I was literally going on air. So that's why my platform decided to die on me. That's what I get. So with gold, like I said, where it's sitting at, last week's high up here, you could find sellers once again offering us lower. This was a pretty violent move post Powell speech. And then we kind of did the same thing we did in equities, just kind of chop around and not really have any interest in going higher or lower. So be cautious, maybe initiating up here. I'd rather probably get up a little higher and then ride it up towards 3340s, 3440s, 3460s. But as we've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks, you got to just play the edges of this wide balance that we've been in since May, which is 3460s. Look for sellers to offer up there and look for buyers to defend up here around 3350s. So not a whole lot has changed. I kind of hate this instrument. I really do. I really hate it. I really wanted to leave this range. Because when you leave this type of balance range, like you just get that violent move one way or the other. So it's like, I don't care. I don't necessarily even think I'm going to trade it, but can I have something else to talk about on Sunday nights versus gold is still in balance? I think everyone's tired of that, including myself. First, I honestly have no idea what caused the drop in Bitcoin. If anyone does, like if there was some sort of news or something someone can explain, or a massive order that came into the sell side that just blew out a bunch of stops, like I'd love to know. But I just saw the screenshots of the candle as I was kind of getting organized for tonight's show. So that's why I was like, oh, let me quickly build a micro Bitcoin chart so that we can have something to talk about, or at least watch how it opened when Globex started. So I don't know. I'm going to try to rebuild the chart. Maybe we can see what it looked like post open. I don't have a micro Bitcoin chart in front of me, and I can't break something by trying to load one right now. So what are Bitcoin futures doing, if anyone knows? What is Bitcoin doing? I should probably look. I can pull it up on my other screen just so I can at least see. I mean, that was a absolute violent move back to 110,000. Now we're settled. We retraced like half of it already. So interesting. But yeah, I wish the chart didn't break. So not going to waste more time talking about it. What did YM do? Well, it made a new all-time high on Friday post Jackson Hole. So this lovely, lovely candle with very, very incredibly poor structure left behind with almost no. In fact, it probably was some zeros sitting in here with prices we didn't actually trade. So does YM fall back to its old all-time high up here towards 45,370s and clean this all up? Well, that'd be nice. Maybe we'll get that. Maybe that'll actually happen. Bitcoin tracking the 2-year yield. I don't know enough about the crypto markets as far as like what it inverses, what it correlates with, how it moves, why it moves. I've stayed away since I had several Bitcoins from like 2014 that I just immediately transferred to US dollar. So that's my crypto story. Could be rich. I could be doing who knows what these days. Had I actually took the time as a college student to maybe understand what it was and how it worked and why holding it might have been a good idea instead of just immediately transferring it to USD. So that's why I know I didn't really talk about it, but broke out violently to a new all-time high. Let's see if it settles back to the top edge of this balance back up here towards 45,000s in this coming week. That's what I'd be looking for. Week open up here, last week's high. Like if you lose this, like we find some momentum to the downside, I mean, maybe take a YM short back to the old all-time high. Seems like it might work. We'll see. Anyway. John, you lost your wallet back in the day. I know that's how I just try not to think about it, not to really be involved that much. I really have like no crypto holdings whatsoever. I have a very, very small amount, but I try not to let it beat me up because who knew? At that point it was trading a couple $100. So it's like, did I really think it was going to be at 110,000 at some point? No. I would have probably thought you were crazy if you told me in 15 years that's how much it'll be worth. Owned Apple at $14 and sold at 21. I have a few stories like that where I had a couple stocks during the COVID V that like doubled in like 2 weeks, and so I sold, and then they went from being like $20 a share to $100 a share like shortly thereafter. So I bought it at 10 and it went to 20 and it went to 100 a couple weeks later, and it's like, okay, I doubled my money in 2 weeks. Is that crazy? No. So I don't know. I guess sometimes those violent moves like that, those bubble type moves to the upside, I guess I'm just never on the train, because I guess I just think I just doubled my money and I did nothing, and that happened so quick. Like, okay, let me find the next thing that I can get in. So anyway, let's jump. What's the S doing? Anything? Yeah, sitting on the lows so far for Globex. But yeah, like I said, that week open at 93s. Something to watch this week. I don't have a Bitcoin wallet. This was any Bitcoin I had was immediately transferred to US dollar and then transferred to a US bank account. So that Bitcoin was long gone from 2014, the few coins that I had. So it is what it is. At least I'm not the pizza guy. All right. Let's grab that. All right. So the elephant in the room, as far as earnings releases, is going to be the Lord and Savior of SPY himself, NVIDIA, on Wednesday after the close. But not to be outdone, we have several large names in the software as a service, business applications, IT space, with Okta and MongoDB also reporting after the close on Tuesday. NVIDIA, obviously, going to be the one that's really going to move the market, but you're going to get a larger picture at corporate spend too between Snowflake and CrowdStrike. So you'll get a good understanding of how much they are growing as well, what businesses are continuing to spend, and how someone like Snowflake's AI narrative continues to fit into the software as a service and business application space. So I'm curious to actually hear how they report as well, but everything is going to be outdone by whatever NVIDIA does this week. That'll be really, really interesting. NVIDIA basically trading at its all-time highs. Price for perfection. We'll see. We'll see how it all goes. I'm curious what the reaction may be, whether it's positive or negative, how they guide. and more things coming out of the gosh, what is it? The whole thing with M&A&D and the basically what, like the US getting like a 15% cut on any and all chip sales to China, how they maybe articulate that too will be interesting. But that's the main event for this week, to be honest. Is really going to be NVIDIA. Dollar General, some of the dollar stores and always are interesting just to check in on a pulse of the low income consumer as well. It's always interesting to hear how they guide, how they're seeing, if there is any pain. Have they had some hits from things like tariffs? So curious to see how they report as well before the bell on Thursday. We have Marvell and Dell, Alibaba on Friday, Sentinel One as well after the close on Thursday, and several other retail names. So curious to see how their foot traffic and things have been. Consumers, I mean, I still feel the pain every time I shop and go get groceries and do other things. So I don't know. Everyone's still got money apparently to buy a lot of things after so many years of continuing to have inflation be front and center. I don't know. Everything's expensive, guys. That's what I've learned. I just had to refurnish basically my entire downstairs has been paid for and refurnished at this point over the last 2 months. So I don't know how people do it. I don't know how everybody affords these things, but it is what it is. So yeah, NVIDIA Wednesday after the close. Get your popcorn ready because that's going to be the main event of this week. Any others I'm missing? No, those are the big ones. Okta, Mongo, NVIDIA, Snowflake, CrowdStrike will be the ones that I'm paying attention to. All right. So, not necessarily a lighter news week. There are several that obviously are going to still move the markets as we have become accustomed to in the pre-market. But we will have Chicago Fed National Activity Index at 7:30 tomorrow morning, followed by new home sales at 9 a.m. So after the bell, we will have new home sales when Leo and I are trading the open tomorrow morning. And then later in the session, you do have a 3 and 6 month bill auction. So with rate cuts all but assured at this point, we'll see how many for the rest of the year. It seems like Fed Fund futures traders are pricing in now 2 for the rest of this year. Powell basically doing everything but signal that he's going to cut at least once. So we'll see how it continues to evolve. But it seems like we're going to get a cut in September. So we'll see how the bonds continue to react with some of the auctions this week. On Tuesday morning, we will have durable goods. Barkin will be talking before the opening bell. And consumer confidence, Richmond Fed after the bell, Dallas Fed Services Index at 9:30. So a bunch of data shortly thereafter the bell at 9 a.m. And then we will have a 2-year auction at noon. So one that I would probably be flat for is going to be that. If I was trading at lunchtime, I might not want to be stopped out of a trade for no reason as the 2-year comes in. I never love trading around the 2-year and 10-year personally, but you guys will do what you will. I just hate being in a position during these and then, getting wicked on a stop break even 2 minutes after the results come in. And it's just I hate it. So I don't really trade around them, even though half the time it's a non-event and you don't even notice. Wednesday. Wait, when's PC? Is that Thursday? Yes. No, it's GDP. Maybe PC is Friday. Okay, we'll get there. PC is Friday. I'm just an idiot. Wednesday's pretty light unless you're a crude or energy trader. For the most part, that's all those are. We will have another speech from Barkin continuing to be Barkin. And then we will have a 5-year note auction Wednesday at lunchtime, 12 o'clock Central. And then the major ones are going to be Thursday and Friday with Thursday morning at 7:30. We'll have GDP initial jobless claims, continuing jobless claims, and core PCE quarter over quarter. So a lot of data for the algos in the market to kind of sift through before we actually open the bell. And then we will have pending home sales at 9 a.m., followed by a 4 and 8 week bill auction. Kansas City Fed Composite Index at 10 a.m. Gosh, Thursday's got a lot of random data. And then a 7-year auction at noon, followed by Waller talking at the Globex Open on Thursday. So plenty of data, but then the main event will be the Fed's favorite flavor of inflation, the core PCE. So we'll see how this one comes in, but this is the information. They don't care as much about CPI and PPI. They care about the core PCE data. So we'll see if this continues to show that inflation has and was and continues to be defeated. But this will definitely be something that will likely move the markets one way or the other. So 7:30 Central Time, Friday morning, PCE. And if you missed it, we've got more data after that. We will have Chicago PMI 15 minutes after the bell at 8:45 Central Time. And then my favorite data release that I always bring up to you guys is going to be the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Final at 9 a.m. Nothing's worse than getting stopped out of a trade or slipped on a trade during the U of M release. So I don't bother having a position on during this. There's many of reasons for it, but as always, I tell you about it. I remind you guys, it's just one of those violent moves that can, for some reason, come out of this data release. So recommendation, always be flat during that. And that's the week. A lot of things, but the main event's going to be NVIDIA earnings on Wednesday after the bell and the core PCE numbers Friday morning before RTH. So that is your economic calendar and data. Back to the charts. We've done nothing since the violent move to the upside and then retraced all of it back towards settlement. So pretty quiet Globex thus far. Nothing moving a whole lot. And we've reached the section of the program where if there are questions, if there are anything that you guys want to know from me, now's the time to ask it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer. As always, you guys can throw questions in throughout the program, and I'm going to go back and see if anybody did. But if there are anything you want me to walk you through, re-go over, talk about further, get my opinion on, I am happy to do so. If not, we can always just let you all get out of here early. Go back to your Sunday evening, your last weekend without football. So I know it's going to be hard to drive everybody away from their screens on NFL Sundays to come get prepped and watch your market prep guy here. But yeah, this will be the last week. Next week, college football is back. We did have a week 0 kickoff between Kansas State and Iowa State in Ireland, which was kind of cool to watch on the TV yesterday. So it'll be a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed doing this show on NFL Sunday, and I think everybody else did too. So it'll be good that fall is in full swing. My house will smell like enough like a pumpkin spice latte to make any human jealous. So I'm looking forward to some brisk fall days to get out of this 100-degree heat that we continue to have here in North Texas. So looking forward to everybody hanging out as we get into the dog days of fall. Nothing's worse than the dog days of summer trades. So it'll be great that is over. Maybe seasonality comes into play. Maybe volume returns to this market and we can find some decent trades. Johnny FX has a question. I want your opinion on gamma levels. So it's something that I have on one of my charts. I monitor, I watch, I don't necessarily use for entries, exits, and things like that, but it's something I use in correlation with other MGI to kind of guide decision making. I do watch option data, 0DTEs, and things like that. I think there is 100% something to it. Is it going to be a strategy that's going to make you a winner? No, because you don't understand exactly what's happening with all of that gamma, all of that volume, and all of the other things that are happening with larger institutional players. But can you use them in correlation with other pieces of information and come to a common theme, like when it all kind of aligns, and use that, then seeing something on time and sales that makes sense to initiate off of? Yes. Would I place a limit order at a gamma level and say this is going to work? 100% no, I would not do that necessarily. I think you need to kind of gauge other things with it for it to have, some aspect of reasoning to kind of push you into the trade. I think it's just always been something that I add as an extra layer and not something that truly guides like an entry, exit, things like that. Now, if I was in a trade and I was in a runner and we were coming into what I would call some aspect of resistance with options data, yes, I'm probably going to exit around there or be very much ready to have my finger on the flatten button at some of those spots. But I think there's a lot of forces in the market that a lot of people, including myself, don't necessarily understand. And that is still one of the ones that I, would like to say I have a good understanding of, but I'm still taking to school the more things I read and understand. So I think volume and price action is still going to rule the majority of other things. Why do you use volume candles instead of time? It's just something I've gotten accustomed to doing in the way my charts kind of flow. I like to see the volume-based candles and then the delta of those candles kind of change color. It just makes things a little easier for me, being more of an order flow trader, watching things like time and sales, and using some of the other indicators that we talk about and kind of use. It flows better for my mind. I still do have like a 5-minute chart so I can see more time-based structures and other things as well. But the volume candles, when you really are looking at things like time and sales and really looking at like the pulling and stacking on a DOM and trying to make sense of it in a way, it just helps kind of put the full picture together, which is why you'll see like if I'm using volume candles and you see like my leg to leg here start to build, like it just continues to paint the rest of that picture. If I'm just looking at time-based candles and volume at the bottom of my screen, I'm not really getting exactly what's happening in the auction and on time and sales. Like I don't really know who has control. I just know price ticked this over the last couple minutes and there was a larger volume spike, but I don't know, was that to the sell side? Is someone get exhausted? Was that somebody's like stop blowing out and a bunch of just market orders came in? Like you kind of need the rest of that picture, which is why I've kind of moved to my execution chart being true volume. And then all of my longer time frame charts, like I said, I still use a 5-minute with some other MGI that just kind of help me guide like the normal structure, more of a time-based structure of the session. So I'll do like an opening range and things on that as well. But I use several things. What market depth is your data? I don't know what you're doing if you're not using level 2. So I'd always recommend using level 2. Johnny, if it works for you, like I said, it's something I still incorporate into my strategy, but I don't think it's like it's never been the sole piece that I need to be successful. I think it helps continue to I just like when those things align with other things I'm also looking at. Like if we approach one of those levels and I see a bunch of, buy orders come at time and sales and someone's lifting the offer, then yeah, I'm happily going to lean into that, that gamma area or whatever it is, or options volume spot that I'm kind of watching. If I saw a ton of calls come in or whatever it is at a certain spot, yes, then I can kind of use that to gauge. So I think there is something to it. I don't think it's something that I could personally use like a standalone. Whenever it's super choppy. Whenever it's super choppy, I always check, and a lot of times the gamma's in the room with us. I know. I always like to make that joke to piss off Leo more than anybody. Is the gamma in the room with us? Is the options expiration week in the room with us, which is why we can't have range expansion. I always love that. Sometimes those things do play out, but sometimes it's just noise, and it just comes down to I don't need that information. It just clogs up my brain when I'm trying to add some of those extra little things to it. So anyway, that's that. So I'm going to wrap it up here. We'll do a quick recap of ES and then we'll let y'all get out of here. So as I was saying, in ES, I am cautiously watching this basically the all-time highs, the top edge of this little wider distribution. So if we were to combine the last, I guess the early parts of the previous week, when we were trading and 6460s was the floor and the all-time high was the top of that, I'm going to be very much gauging the auction in this area. I don't really necessarily want to initiate in the top side of this, but I'm going to kind of use the week open up here at 6490s to just tell me, are the sellers in the room with us? And if it makes sense, do we get another test down here towards 6460s? In which case, if I can find something I'm looking for on time and sales to kind of say that this little low is going to continue to be supported the way it was during kind of all of these trading sessions, then I'll happily take a long there and maybe go try to get a wider move up towards the all-time high. But if we lose this, I would expect a lot of Friday gets retraced, possibly back down here towards 6420s, if not a little lower. So that's how I'm kind of looking at it. I hate initiating near all-time highs. I'm just terrible at buying highs and selling at the new all-time high. I need to get better at it. So we'll see. But for the most part, I'm not overly impressed based on, like I said, what NQ did. Like NQ's got a decent amount of structure to kind of get through to go make a new all-time high. ES is just off to the races. So we'll see. But given that NQ's kind of lagging a little bit, and maybe tech is, like maybe it takes NVIDIA to pushes up and kind of retrace some of the structure and get NQ back up towards where ES is trading in terms of the all-time high. If not, I kind of want to watch the 600 spot to gauge, like, can I short this down towards the threes, or are we going to go up towards 800s and kind of make a decision again up here during last week's value area high? So that's how I'm looking at it. That's the prep for the week. I hope everybody has had fun, and I appreciate everybody hanging out with me on your Sunday evening as always. Don't go anywhere, I guess. If you're hanging out, if you're going to be back tomorrow morning, the full crew will be back tomorrow morning to get you guys prepped and organized for your trading week. I will be on to trade the open with Leo, and then we'll be back for double duty to trade the close as well. So you can get a full masterclass on order flow from Mr. Big Cat himself tomorrow if you're going to be tuning in to NC Live. So please join us. Please come hang out. Please troll me and him in the chat. It always brings a lot of joy to all of us. So everybody have a wonderful rest of your Sunday evening, and I will see you all bright and early tomorrow morning on Trade the Open. Cheers.